All right, let's check out Gatsby Image. So Gatsby Image is a really powerful feature of Gatsby. Uh, it basically provides a way for you to automatically optimize your images, provides things like lazy loading and this nice blur up effect, um, and really solves for the problem of huge image files slowing down the performance of your site. So we're going to do a quick example. If you don't have Gatsby installed, the CLI installed on your system, it's as simple as doing an npm install -g for global and then Gatsby CLI. I've already got it installed, but by doing this, you'll be able to use the command line for Gatsby. So once we're there, I'm going to check to make sure I'm in the right directory. All right, so I'm in my web projects folder, and now I'm just going to do Gatsby new, and then you can call it whatever you want. I'll call it Gatsby image tutorial. So now it's going to spin up all the files and structure the folders for us. And it's going to give us a lot of nice features, dependencies right out of the box, including the dependencies that we need for using Gatsby Image. So if you're building this from scratch and not using the default starter, then I'll show you some of the things that you need to take a look for when you are utilizing Gatsby Image. So Gatsby Image tutorial. All right. So you can see right out of the box, we've got, obviously our node modules, and then the source with our components, images, some default images and pages. And if I go into my integrated terminal here, I'm using VS Code. If you have your own, if you're using Atom or Sublime or things like that, if you run Gatsby develop, two things are going to kick off. One, you're going to see it's kind of like npm run start or yarn start on with a React app, but you're going to be able to preview your Gatsby site right away, and you can see this is what we're starting off with. And then another thing that's going to come in handy is the the GraphQL which we will get to in just a little bit, but that's localhost, and whatever you're running on default is 8000, and then 3 underscores GraphQL. All right, so in order to use Gatsby Image, you want to double check to make sure that you've got Gatsby plugin sharp and Gatsby transformer sharp both installed. So that would just be a yarn add or an npm install, and then these two plugins. And then the Gatsby source file system. So this default starter already has that set up for us. But basically, this is just pointing GraphQL to the folder where we're storing all of our images. And so this guy here is actually already in our images folder, the Gatsby astronaut. And then the Gatsby icon is actually up here as the favicon. So what we'll do, let's start off by getting an image. So there's a site I like to use called Unsplash, open sourced images. Let's just get a nice little puppy picture. This guy looks nice. So let's save him, and we'll go into just the folder where we were before. Go into our images, rename it puppy, and save. Now you can see that popped in there. So we've got our image. So if we go into our pages, you can actually see there's this image component. And what that's referencing, if you follow it back, it's in this component here, which makes use of what we're going to be using. It's use static query. And so basically to kind of destructure this query here, you're setting a variable called data and setting it to use static query. That's actually built with it's a React hook. So you'll need to use this inside of functional components. You wrap it in parentheses and then call GraphQL and use the backticks. And I'll build this out, but just describing it now. And then query, open up your curly braces. This says placeholder image here. I could take this out, but for the ease of just having some kind of nice names, you can rename the path to this file here. So if I called this, let's say like Astro, and then changed placeholder image down here to Astro, then I could see that my astronaut is still showing up. So this is just kind of simplifying the name to save you some typing. Then child image sharp, we're using fluid, and then this fragment here called Gatsby image sharp fluid. So don't expect to know what all of that is right off the bat, but just showing you that this Gatsby image is actually already being used right out of the box. So if we want to use it and we don't want to use this image component, one issue with Gatsby image is that you can't, it's kind of tricky and kind of a lot of code to reuse this image component and like passing down props. You might think like, oh, I'll just pass down props and just change this file name, or find some other way to make this a little bit more dynamic. And you can, but it's kind of tricky to set up. And so instead of doing that, I'll show you here how to just go ahead and use that use static query hook to set us up. So what we're going to do first is get rid of these parentheses, and we're going to actually wrap it in a set of curly braces. I'm going to get this whole thing, cut it, return, and then my parentheses, and just paste that back in. And when I save it, you'll notice it pops over. I've got this extension in VS Code called Prettier, which formats things on save, kind of keeps it nice and clean. All right, so we've still got our Gatsby image. One thing I like with this image component is it gives me the structure of my query. And so to show you the power of GraphQL in this graphical interface, I want to show you like kind of how you can structure your queries by using this interface. So if I go to File and then Relative Path, so this is basically like where in my file system is GraphQL going to look. And remember, we set that up, or Gatsby set it up for us in the Gatsby config. So relative path is going to guide us to a file named Gatsby, what was it called? Gatsby Astronaut. Yeah, Gatsby Astronaut .png. Now, after the parentheses, it's giving me or it's kind of letting me know like, hey, you want to. Oh wait, nope, sorry. It's giving me an error because it wants me to say it equals and then the string. So it's telling me like, hey, there shouldn't be a string here. It's querying for something where the relative path equals and then the name of the file. So now I'm getting another error because it says must have a selection of subfields. So what that's saying is like, okay, I'm querying this file path, like what do you want from it? So open up some curly braces. If I hit Control Space, or I think Option Space on a Mac, it's either Option Space or Command Space, but this will give me a bunch of different options for some different things that I can return. And what we're looking for is child image sharp. It's going to tell me the same thing. you need a selection of subfields. Open up curly braces, control space, and then look. Two kind of main subfields here that you would typically use is either fixed or fluid. So fixed would be if you want your image to be a certain size no matter what. Say I want it to be 300 pixels by 300 pixels. I'd use fixed. Whereas fluid, which we're going to use here, is going to take up the space of its parent container. So whatever the parent container is, that image is going to take up whatever space that is. And then the last bit here, so we've got all of these different subfields here that will take care of some different optimizations. So this base 64 is going to give us that blur up. The traced SVG can give you the option of while your image is loading, showing you this kind of like nice sort of like outline type thing. We're going to wrap actually everything, all that we need up in something called a fragment, which is going to give us a whole package of a bunch of these that we need. But just to show that, to test that that GraphQL can find this file, let's just go ahead and do source set. And so now we're not getting any more errors. If we hit play, you can see the information is here. So if you saw an error here, that would let you know, like, there's either something wrong with my query, maybe I forgot the EQ like you saw me do earlier, maybe you misspelled your your image name. Sometimes what I'll do is like I'll accidentally do like a JPEG here when it's actually a PNG. So this graphical interface is awesome for being able to shape your queries and to test to make sure like if things are showing up, because you'll definitely run into like, hey, I think I coded this right, why is it not showing up? Let me check graphical and see if the file's there, and if it is, then I can figure out, okay, I've eliminated the issue of the file path, and now I can check and see, in my component or whatever it is in my Gatsby file, I can go kind of hunt down my problem. So getting back to the actual page here, if I'm just gonna go ahead and make a kind of following that image file. I'm gonna say const data equals. Remember, we're gonna use static query as a hook because this is a functional component. So use static query. That actually automatically imported it for me. If it didn't do that for you, just make sure you add use static query as an import from Gatsby. Open up some parentheses and then GraphQL. Now this is going to be imported from Gatsby Image. So I'm going to import. Oh no, this one is not. This one is from Gatsby as well. So GraphQL from Gatsby. Now in Gatsby, you're going to open up some backticks. I'm going to say query. And then remember, we can call this whatever we want at the front to save us some typing. So remember, we're looking for this puppy image. So we'll say puppy and then file relative path. And we can even use our GraphQL here. So relative path equals call it puppy.jpg. Curly braces, child image sharp. Curly braces fluid. And then remember I said we were going to use something called a fragment. So this fragment again is something where it'll take in all of the like the different pieces that we want to fully optimize the image. So we're gonna do dot 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 Gatsby image sharp fluid, and that'll wrap up everything that we need in order to get this image up and running. One more thing that we are going to need is the image component, and that is the thing from Gatsby Image. So now, if we replace this image component with img, and instead of source, because we're using the fluid image, the one that takes up the space of its parent component or parent element, we're going to say fluid equals, and then we'll say data. It's just like a typical JavaScript object. So data dot puppy dot child image sharp dot fluid. And with these Gatsby image components, you can actually do like an alt tag as well. So we'll say puppy being cute. Close that up. And now if we save it, we go back, we can see our puppy. Refreshing. Okay, so you can see when I refresh that, so it started off kind of blurry, but now, so it's kind of like sort of like a lazy load way of getting the rest of your site up and running, and having a placeholder there so that your users can expect to see something coming, but allowing the rest of your site to get going while that image is processing and getting ready. So that's how you would use that here in your index page. Oh, okay, never mind. So this, you can see VS Code for me will kind of darken any components that I'm not using, so I can actually get rid of that image now, save it, and the puppy's still there. So you can actually do this same thing with components as well. So this is in our pages, but if we wanted to make, say, a brand new component with this puppy, we can make a new component. So we'll call it puppy.js, and then import React from React const puppy, and then return our div. And we can just copy over some of the things that we did from index, so we know we're going to need, we can just copy these 2 lines and then just get rid of link, because we're not going to need to link anything. And then it's basically just the same thing. So I can grab this query here. I'm just going to cut it. Probably get an error here. Yeah, that's fine. We'll come back to it in a second. So just pasting that query back, and then just grabbing this image here, putting it inside of the div. Auto format, got rid of my parentheses. And then importing that puppy component, so I can get rid of this. Since we're not using static query or GraphQL, I can import puppy from /puppy. So sometimes you'll see this hot update was not successful. Just refresh it, and usually you'll see, let's see, expected a string for built-in components. Okay, so we got puppy, same thing here. Oh, because I didn't export it. So now I refresh, and there's the puppy. So this, you saw it used initially inside of a pages component. We used it here inside of just a regular functional component as well. And again, solving for that problem of large image sizes and allowing the user to access the rest of your site while your images are processing. So it's a pretty powerful tool. So that's it. Play around with it. Some things that you might run into, especially with Fluid, sometimes you might actually see like your page show up and then you inspect it. So there's no errors or anything, but you don't see an image here. And sometimes what that has to do with, especially with these Fluid images, is the width of the parent container or the parent element. So what you'll want to do, if I right click and inspect this puppy, you're seeing all this, the picture. So this div, this Gatsby image wrapper, one kind of troubleshooting thing that you can try is going to your CSS and targeting the Gatsby image wrapper and just giving that a width to make sure, like, try giving it a width of 100 so that this wrapper takes up the full width of its parent container. Is one possible solution. This div already has some default styling in the layout that Gatsby gave us with its layout.css file. But if you're running into an issue, if this didn't have, let's see if I take this away. So if I get rid of max, oh, no, it's still there. So that's just one thing to check out, is targeting that Gatsby image wrapper. Another thing too is if I, again, if I can't see it, I could either give this an ID of, puppy container, or, target it however you want. You could give it a class, whatever, but you could, target this specific div and give it a width. You could also, and then, again, targeting this in your layout, and then you could also use inline styling, which you don't want to reach for all the time, but you want to, if you're looking for, or if I want to say width 300 pixels, let's give it 200. So you can see that shrunk. But those are some things to kind of troubleshoot with if you're having issues. And then if you're getting other errors, sometimes, for the most part, Gatsby has done a good job with getting GraphQL up to speed, kind of like while the development environment is still running. But sometimes what you might need to do is just kill the process in your terminal and then restart it, do another Gatsby develop, and then that way Gatsby will know or it'll be able to pick up the changes in your files and see that new one. But we didn't run into that issue there. So a couple ways to troubleshoot if you're running into problems. So hopefully this was helpful, and that actually is it this time. So thanks for checking this video out. If you liked it, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll be working on some more React and Gatsby stuff coming up soon. So be sure to be on the lookout. See you next time.